My name is Thomas Reed. A few weeks ago, my own daughter threw food in my face because I told her I couldn't pay for her luxury trip. In that moment, I wasn't just humiliated, I was erased as her father. But what came after shocked everyone. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story. They say a father's worth can be measured by the size of his wallet. That night, I learned that humiliation has a taste, and it was hurled straight into my face. The rooftop restaurant glowed with amber light, spilling from glass lanterns. Jazz murmured in the background, barely audible over the chatter of the crowd and the clinking of silverware. The skyline stretched out in every direction, the city glimmering beneath us like a constellation. I sat at the center of the long table, my tie knotted too tight, feeling the eyes of my daughter and her entourage shift toward me like the slow turn of a blade. Years ago, I told Sophia something I thought would anchor her through. Life money can buy everything, but respect creates it all. Tonight she had discarded that truth, as though it were a napkin, stained with wine. And as for me, I could feel the weight of those words pressing down, daring me not to forget them. She leaned forward, her manicured fingers sliding a folder across the table. The document inside wasn't a contract, but it might as well have been an itinerary. Itemized with glossy photographs of villas by the sea, first-class flights, and bottles of vintage wine. Sophia smiled as though presenting a triumph. "This is the budget for my European trip. Only 6 weeks, father, nothing excessive." I skimmed the figures. The numbers bled off the page, each one more absurd than the last. My chest tightened, but my voice remained steady. "I can't cover all of this. I'll contribute something, but not the whole amount." Silence rippled across the table, sharper than broken glass. Catherine's fork clattered against her plate. "Thomas," she whispered, her tone sharpened by embarrassment. "You're making a scene. Just explain. Tell them why you can't." Her eyes flicked toward the others, toward Landon, the smirking young man in an immaculate suit, and toward the friends who had tagged along for Sophia's farewell dinner. I realized then she wasn't defending me, but managing me as if I were a liability she couldn't quite hide. Landon let out a short laugh, not cruel, but cutting all the same. "A real man doesn't count pennies. He just makes it happen. Isn't that right, Sophia?" The table erupted with knowing chuckles. I felt their amusement spread across the polished surface, like spilled wine. I could have said more, could have reminded them who I had once been in the world of finance, the nights I stayed awake, building something from nothing. But I saw the look in Catherine's eyes, pleading for me to yield, to avoid tarnishing the image she had curated. And I understood my silence was worth more to her than my dignity. Sophia's lips curled into a smile I didn't recognize. "Don't worry," she said loudly, her words sweetened for the crowd. "Dad has always believed in tough love. Isn't that right, father?" Something in her tone was rehearsed, designed to sting. My pulse hammered, but I forced my jaw to remain set, my breath measured. The humiliation wasn't the sharp sting of a slap. It was the slow, deliberate erosion of stone. When dessert arrived, the tension reached its breaking point. Plates of delicate confections, chocolate draped in spun sugar, landed in front of us. Sophia picked hers up with calculated precision. For a moment I thought she would finally relent, lower her voice, lean across the table, and whisper an apology no one else could hear. Instead, she turned, raised the plate, and with a fluid motion, pressed the cake squarely into my face. Gasps ricocheted across the room. The band faltered mid-note. Warm cream and chocolate dripped down my cheek, staining my collar, seeping into the lines of my skin. Laughter and whispers swirled around me, indistinguishable from one another. My daughter had transformed humiliation into theater, and the restaurant became her stage. I didn't shout. I didn't move at first. I sat still, feeling the weight of cream on my skin, the coldness of chocolate sliding down my chin. Every eye in the room watched to see whether I would rage or retreat. Slowly, I lifted the napkin from my lap and wiped my face clean. I set it gently on the table, stood and smoothed my jacket. My voice carried across the silence that followed, even unbroken. Thank you. Tonight, I finally know the real price of this dinner. As I turned away from the table, my pocket vibrated. I pulled out my phone, and the screen glowed with a message from Marcus Gray. Ready to talk. Urgent. I paused, the words burning brighter than the city lights behind me. Humiliation washes off the skin with soap and water, but the silence of your own family that lingers like a bruise. The morning light crept through the blinds of my apartment, a thin slice of gold that illuminated the remains of the night before. On the counter, the napkin from the rooftop dinner sat crumpled, its fabric stained with dried chocolate sauce. I had kept it without thinking, as though the evidence of disgrace could somehow anchor me. The stain could be laundered out, but the memory of Sophia's laughter, Catherine's downcast gaze, and the hush of strangers watching me drip with dessert, those marks would not fade. My phone buzzed. Catherine's name flashed on the screen. I considered letting it ring, but habit won. Thomas, she began without greeting, her voice sharp with accusation. Do you realize what you did last night? You humiliated Sophia in front of her friends, in front of Landon. She couldn't even sleep from the embarrassment. I held the phone away for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Catherine, all I said was that I couldn't fund her entire trip. That's hardly humiliation. You should have handled it differently, she snapped. You're her father. You should protect her, not expose her limitations. Now everyone thinks she's dependent and spoiled. A bitter laugh escaped me. Everyone thinks that because it's true. Silence stretched thin across the line. Then she exhaled, weary and cold. If you can't be the kind of father she needs, maybe you shouldn't be at these dinners at all. The call ended before I could respond. Almost immediately, a text appeared from Sophia herself. Next time, if you can't pay, don't come. The words hit harder than the cake had. My own daughter reducing my presence to a credit line. I set the phone down, my chest heavy, but my mind sharpening. The echo of Marcus's message from last night pulsed in my thoughts. Ready to talk. Urgent. By afternoon, I found myself seated across from Marcus Gray in a quiet midtown cafe. He looked older, the corners of his hair flecked with gray, but his eyes were the same, calculating, restless, always 3 moves ahead. He greeted me with a firm handshake and wasted no time. I saw the news about your situation, he said evenly. I figured you'd be ready for something new. From his leather briefcase, he pulled out a folder, thick with documents. Spreadsheets, charts, and forecasts spilled across the table. I'm building a fintech platform, regulation light but data heavy, and I need someone who sees patterns where others only see noise. He tapped one page, a graph that curved sharply upward. Thomas, do you remember those equities you picked up in 2019, low-profile tech, undervalued at the time? They're about to matter in a big way. You still have those positions, don't you? I nodded slowly. I had nearly forgotten about that portfolio, a handful of minority stakes I had bought during a volatile quarter, tucked away and ignored while life unraveled. But Marcus was right. If the trend line he showed me held, their value was no longer negligible. It was leverage. I studied the numbers, the projections, the strategy outlined in his notes. Each figure steadied my pulse. Each possibility lifting me further from the pit last night had dug. Here was not just a chance to earn money. This was a chance to restore respect, to prove I was not a man, measured only by a wallet's thickness. I closed the folder with deliberate care and met Marcus's gaze. Count me in. But this time we don't gamble. We play it smart and we play it clean. His grin was the first genuine one I had seen all day. That's the Thomas I remember. We shook hands, the deal forming not just between us but within me, a decision to step back into the arena, not as a supplicant, but as a strategist. As I stepped out of the cafe, the city heat pressing against my suit, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Sophia. Just one line, money or silence. Pick one, Dad. The bruise darkened, and for the first time I felt the beginnings of resolve harden around it. Laughter is a cheap form of entertainment until the bill comes due. By Monday evening, Catherine's house glowed with the soft amber light of a gathering too intimate to be anonymous, yet too pointed to feel comfortable. The dining table was dressed with silverware, polished to a shine wine glasses, brimming with a vintage far beyond my current means, and the chatter of Catherine's friends blended with the sound of clinking cutlery. I kept my back straight, my hands folded, determined not to give them more than silence. Sophia raised her glass high, her smile gleaming like she had won a prize. To Landon, she declared, who insisted on covering the entire trip. Flights, villa, everything. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without him. The table erupted in cheers, their laughter spilling over like champagne bubbles. Several eyes turned toward me, some with pity, some with mockery. One man smirked. Well, Mr. Reed, at least now you can relax. No more financial pressure. Isn't it good when the younger generation steps up? The laughter rippled again. I simply nodded and sipped water, my expression unreadable. Silence is a shield, I reminded myself. Landon leaned back in his chair, basking in the attention, his arms slung casually around Sophia's shoulders. It's nothing, he said with a grin. I believe in giving her the life she deserves. I have more than enough, and debts are just part of the game. You spend to earn, you borrow to grow. Balance sheets are illusions. I caught the slip the way he brushed past the word debts, as if it were lint on an expensive suit. His tone was smooth, but the tremor underneath was real. He quickly shifted to boasting about his family's vacation properties and the so-called expansion of Brooks Corporation into Europe. Yet his vagueness told me more than his bragging ever could. I let the laughter swirl around me, each chuckle tightening into a rope they thought was binding me. Catherine clinked her glass with Landon's. See, Thomas, that's how a real man provides. Maybe you could learn a thing or two. The words stung less than they might have 2 nights ago. I only smiled faintly and returned to my glass. It was not my moment to speak. It was my moment to listen. When the dinner finally ended, I excused myself with polite brevity and returned to my apartment. The silence there was merciful, but I did not waste time savoring it. I powered up my laptop, the familiar hum filling the room. I pulled up public filings, shareholder reports, debt ledgers, everything the Brooks name had left in the open. Numbers, unlike people, don't lie when you know how to listen. Hours slipped past as the truth emerged. Brooks Corporation was bleeding. Debt obligations mounting, assets mortgaged, liquidity dwindling. The empire Landon bragged about was rotting from the inside out, painted with a thin coat of luxury to hide the cracks. I captured the reports, highlighted the weaknesses, and sent the file to Marcus with a short message, confirm, quietly. A reply came within minutes. This is solid. If we time this right, it's your first piece of leverage. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, a strange calm settling over me. The world at that dinner table had laughed, dismissing me as the man too poor to matter. But while they laughed, I had already picked up the knife they didn't see, slipping it into my pocket. As I closed my laptop, Sophia appeared in my mind again. The gleam in her eyes when she clung to Landon's arm, the dismissive curl of her lips when she looked at me. The door of Catherine's house replayed in my memory, Sophia tossing an envelope across the table before leaving. "Don't worry about me, Dad," she had said, sweetly, venom under her tone. "Someone else knows how to take care of me." The envelope had landed with a soft thud. Plane tickets, first class. I had picked them up, slid them into my jacket, and said nothing. Now, back in my apartment, I laid the envelope on my desk. I traced its edges with a fingertip before slipping it into the drawer beside my files. A symbol, a reminder. She thought it was a taunt. To me, it was confirmation. They thought their laughter was free, but I knew better. Every laugh has a cost, and soon someone would pay it. The morning of July 19th began, not in the comfort of home, but in the charged silence of Marcus's fintech office. A dozen screens lit the dim space data streams, cascading in rivers of green and red. The room didn't feel like an office. It felt like a battlefield, where every chart and algorithm was a weapon waiting to be drawn. Marcus stood beside me, his suit jacket slung across a chair's sleeves, rolled to the elbow. He slid a thick packet across the desk, his eyes gleaming with restrained energy. "This is it, Thomas. These are the documents confirming your shares from 2019. Buried, forgotten, and now resurfacing at exactly the right moment. When this goes public, the ones laughing at you won't have much breath left to spare." I picked up the pen, the weight of it heavier than I expected. Not because of the metal, but because of what it meant. My name scratched across the page, steady and unhurried. A confirmation of something I had been waiting for, without even knowing it. I looked up at Marcus. Let them laugh for now. Every joke they make is a drum roll for the silence that's coming. He smiled. Poetic. Ruthless. I like it. The deal was real. The shares locked away quietly 4 years ago were about to bloom into leverage no one expected me to wield. But Marcus wasn't finished. He tapped on his keyboard, pulling up a folder of scanned documents. And here's the second blade. Proof of Brooks family debt. Mortgaged properties, strained credit lines, the whole facade, wobbling on borrowed time. I scanned the file's mortgage papers, signed hastily, assets pledged as collateral, interest payments, gnawing at their empire like termites in the beams. Landon's bravado at Catherine's table 2 nights ago echoed in my mind. Debts are just part of the game. He had no idea I now held the rules of that game in my hand. I slid the folder shut. This stays buried until I decide otherwise. Marcus nodded. Timing is everything. You have the cards. Now wait for the right table to lay them on. That evening, Catherine's dining room felt smaller than usual, suffocating with perfume and pretension. Sophia sat at the center like a queen on her throne, Landon at her side. He wore his arrogance like cologne, heavy and choking. Catherine hovered, orchestrating the meal like it was a stage play. She spared me her usual glances, each one dipped in disdain. Sophia didn't speak directly to me, though her laughter carried a sharpened edge. Landon bragged about vacation itineraries, luxury boutiques in Paris, beachfront dinners in Santorini. "When you live boldly, the world opens its doors," he said, raising his glass. I let them perform. I sat back calm, eating slowly, saying little. To them, my silence was proof of weakness. To me, it was insulation, a place to watch them dig their own holes, while I waited with the rope. Every time Landon mentioned investments, I thought of the file Marcus had shown me. Collapsing assets, mortgaged estates, debt stacked high enough to cast shadows over their entire lineage. The Brooks empire was a sandcastle braced against an inevitable tide. The conversation floated around me like smoke. I didn't need to engage. I didn't need to defend myself. Tonight wasn't about rebuttals. It was about patience. The calm before the storm. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Marcus lit up the screen. Press release scheduled. Friday, July 20th. Same night as Sophia's farewell party. I set the phone face down beside my plate, my lips twitching into the faintest smile. They thought tonight was just another opportunity to sneer at me. What they didn't know was that the game was already in motion. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I was waiting for the moment to turn the entire table upside down. Friday, July 20th. The ballroom glittered under chandeliers, the size of small cars. Light fractured through crystal, like diamonds scattered across the air. Velvet curtains framed the stage where Sophia stood radiant, dressed in silk, her smile rehearsed for the dozens of phones recording every gesture. Catherine hovered close, fussing over every detail, as though the night itself depended on perfection. I stayed to the side, not hidden, not prominent, either just there. The overlooked silhouette tolerated, but dismissed. Landon strutted from table to table, shaking hands like a politician, his watch catching the light each time he raised his arm. When Sophia finally raised her glass, the room hushed, then erupted into applause. To Landon, she announced, voice trembling with pride. The man who has made this entire adventure possible. A ripple of laughter swelled, directed inevitably toward me. The implication didn't need words. Thomas Reed, the man who couldn't even fund his own daughter's dreams. I didn't flinch. Not tonight. Because at that very moment, the LED wall behind her flickered. The image of a champagne bottle froze mid-bubble, replaced by the headline that Marcus had promised. Breaking Novus FinTech. Closes multi-million deal, founding stakeholders announced. And beneath it, my name. Thomas Reed. The crowd's laughter collapsed into a hush so sudden I could hear glasses being set down, forks pausing mid-air. Phones lifted, scrolling, verifying. A murmur spread like fire through dry grass. Sophia's smile faltered. Catherine's hand tightened around her glass stem until it threatened to snap. Landon's jaw clenched a twitch he couldn't disguise. I let the silence breathe. Let it spread. Let it settle into the bones of the room until it became unbearable. Then I turned to Landon, my voice low but carrying quite the role you've been playing. Hero, benefactor, savior of the night. But tell me, Landon, how long can you hold the pose while your family drowns in debt? Marcus appeared from the edge of the room, stepping forward just enough to be seen. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was confirmation, a silent seal of authenticity. The whispers turned sharper gasps, mixing with the clicking of cameras. Guests leaned toward each other, words dripping like poison. Debt Brooks family mortgaged estates. Landon tried to laugh, but the sound broke halfway through, jagged and thin. Baseless rumors, he sputtered. I tilted my head. Rumors backed by signatures at the bank. Shall we project those too? The silence returned heavier, this time suffocating. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, her perfect stage, slipping away grain by grain. Catherine stared at me as though seeing a stranger. I raised my glass, not in toast, but in closure. I don't need applause tonight. Your silence will be enough. I placed the glass down. The sound of crystal on wood rang through the ballroom like a gavel. No one laughed. Not anymore. The ballroom had emptied, but the residue of whispers clung to the air. Glasses half drained, sat abandoned on white linen. Landon had slithered toward the exit. His swagger bled dry. his phone glued to his hand, as if searching for an escape inside the screen. Catherine lingered in silence. Her earlier sharpness collapsed into the curve of her shoulders. Marcus caught my eye, gave a firm nod, and left me to finish what needed to be said, alone. I stepped out onto the hotel terrace. The city stretched below its lights, a constellation of harsh truths and silent witnesses. The July night was warm, the air stirred just enough to remind me that storms passed, leaving clarity in their wake. Behind me, footsteps, hesitant. Then a voice broken where arrogance used to live. Dad. Sophia stood at the threshold, her eyes rimmed red. The same daughter who had once tossed a napkin in my face now held herself like a child, caught between shame and pride. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. I didn't turn right away. My reflection in the glass railing showed a man calm, steady, no longer flinching under laughter. Only then did I face her. Because respect, Sophia, isn't given away like a favor. It's not something you demand by humiliating your father, nor something you buy with another man's wallet. My voice stayed even sharper for its restraint. You threw food at me because I wouldn't pay for your trip. Tonight you saw the price of that disrespect. Her breath hitched. She looked younger, suddenly stripped of her polished confidence. I'm not going to fund your journey, I continued. Not because I can't, but because I will never finance contempt. You want to travel. You walk that road on your own feet, and maybe then you'll understand the weight of what you ask from others. She broke then. Tears spilled raw and unguarded, not because she lacked money, but because for the first time she saw me, truly saw me, not as the weak figure she'd mocked, but as the man who refused to bend. I let the silence stand. It cut deeper than any lecture could. At last I placed a hand on the railing, the city glowing beneath us. Respect, my daughter, is never tossed across a dinner table. It is earned. And tonight I earned mine back. I turned and walked into the night, leaving her beneath the fractured light of the city. Whether she changed or not no longer mattered. The weight had shifted. My honor was no longer theirs to mock. That night under the city lights I realized, respect is never bought. It's earned through the way we stand when others try to break us. My daughter's silence cut deeper than all the laughter she once used to wound me. Justice didn't roar. It whispered, and the silence spoke louder than any applause. Perhaps the hardest battles we fight are not in courtrooms or boardrooms, but at our own dinner tables, and when we stand firm, there, we never bow again.